Ready to get started? So I think this is the closing session, which means I guess I'm the only one who's in the way of you and the beer. So, and I thought I'd just give a few thoughts on tips and tricks, but really open it up to a Q&A and see if you guys have questions or topics that you want to talk about. And if not, you want to get to the beer early, that's okay too. So, Techstars has been around for 10 years. We started with one accelerator in Boulder, Colorado, back in 2007. Weren't a whole heck of a lot of role models back then. We were sort of making it up as we went along. And what was interesting was it took a year to sort of make a mistake and figure out how to fix it. You would do something one year, see if it worked. If it didn't work, you waited to the next year, you made some adjustments, you fine-tuned those, and then you had to wait another year. Of course, in the world now, there's plenty of accelerators out there, and there's plenty of things that have been tried, and there's plenty of best practices. And so I applaud everybody who comes to AcceleratorFest and events like these to learn from each other, because I think it's figuring out what those best practices are and tying them all together and sharing them with each other that makes all of our accelerators stronger. We learned that as we added more. It was sort of one a year until 2009, then it was 2 a year, and then it was 3 a year as we added other cities. We're running about 30 a year now, and in many ways, that's like a big giant petri dish, or 30 great petri dishes of different experiments that happen all over the place, so that we can learn from you, you can learn from us, we can learn from other accelerators. Because I think, as I like to describe sometimes, it's super easy to run an accelerator, right? Anybody can do it, right? All you have to do is put up a website, get some companies to apply, get some office space. It doesn't even have to be very nice. And you can say, yay, I have an accelerator, right? But are they good companies? Is it a good accelerator? Maybe not. And again, that's what I think events like this one help promote those best practices, because the way I think about it is that it takes only 3 or 4 things to be able to say you have an accelerator, but it takes about 1,000 things to have a good accelerator. You have to get all of the details right, from recruiting to companies, to selecting the best companies, to choosing the staff that is going to run the accelerator, to thinking about mentorship and who the right mentors are, to thinking about the curriculum, to thinking about the funding, to your perception of your brand in the marketplace. How you say no is important as well, so that the companies that don't get to participate don't soil your image out in the marketplace. How you deal with bad actors that come into the program, because in our version anyway, we have 80 to 100 mentors that are participating, and maybe an equal number of investors that are participating in each of the accelerator programs, and who knows what they're doing. And that can run the gamut to the very bad things that we read about in the press recently, to they seem like a great mentor, they have a lot of great experience, their LinkedIn looks fantastic, I had a great introductory meeting with them, but when they went and met with the startups, they spent the whole time on their phone. Right? And that happens, and you have to get mechanisms to figure out who those are and prune them out of the system and replace them with people who actually want to be engaged. And so it's sort of building on the muscle of detail after detail to make each program better than the last, and not make the same mistakes that we've all made before, and repeat them over and over again. And as long as you have a relentless desire to improve, and you're thinking about each little element and making it better, then I think you have a good opportunity to be one of the great accelerators. As I was saying in one of the previous sessions, one of the interesting things about the accelerator market is it's only really existed in the post-recession era, post-2008. There are very few accelerators that have been around longer than that. And we haven't had an economic downturn, and as I was saying earlier, I expect it to be devastating to the accelerator industry, because I think what you'll find is the next economic downturn is what's really going to separate out great accelerators from good or not good. So, having said all of that, you're all here, so you must be part of the group of great accelerators that are interested in getting better and improving. And so I'm going to sort of pause here and see if there's any questions and if we can take this conversation in whatever direction you'd like it to go. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, can you discuss your business model and why you think it's been successful? So central to our business model is finding great companies. We view ourselves as founder first is the term that we use, and we view ourselves as investors. And we orient everything that we do around that. Because we invest in companies and take equity, we ultimately succeed because that equity is worth something. It's a great message to founders because it means that we'll win or lose together. If we're not successful, we're not successful together, and you haven't given up anything to us. If you are successful, you share a small portion of that success. And so the ultimate measure of success and the ultimate business model are liquidity events, exits, selling the company, going public. Now, I recognize that that's a long journey, right? It might be that, we're having companies today exit that went through the program 5-10 years ago. And so, obviously, there are short-term things that most accelerators do to bring in revenue in the short term, because you can't really just give a little slice of your equity to the landlord and to the pizza delivery guy for your accelerator. They tend to want to be paid in cash. And so most accelerators bring in some level of corporate partnership, or some accelerators bring in some level of corporate partnership, and that has a whole range from sort of the sponsorship logo on the wall at one end of the spectrum to very deep engagements to run corporate innovation programs, or there's benevolent benefactors, people who have want to fund programs, or there's donors, or it's sponsored by university or government or other institutions. For us, we're not funded in those ways. We are oriented around having our equity be worth it, and then also layering on a layer of corporate engagement. Does that make sense? Other questions? Yeah.
What's the obvious thing that people do poorly over again? Even maybe some of your own program managers that just off it every time?
That's a good question. Do you want to narrow it down in what area, or you don't? Yeah. So the question was, what is the obvious mistake that people keep making over and over again? Let me think about that. I think it's selecting based on idea. That we all tend to fall in love with, oh my God, I could use this thing, right, that you're discussing, or that you're applying into the program. We find that 25% of the companies that come through the program pivot. And so right off the bat, if 25% of the companies pivot, you're not investing, or you shouldn't be investing in their idea. The other statistic is that I think it's 60+% of companies fail because of CoFounder issues. It's not because they run out of money. It's not because they had a terrible idea. They couldn't get along with their co-founder. And so so we look carefully at sort of the team dynamics. And I'll give you our criteria in a second. The last point on that is, if you're not evaluating the market, if you're just saying, wow, I could really use that, you're not evaluating whether that's a market of you and the 5 other people like you, or this has the potential to be really big. And so we develop 6 criteria for selecting companies. It's sort of a joke, but it's not really a joke, because the 6 criteria are team, market progress, idea. And the idea there is that team matters so much that it's worthy of the first 3 spots. Market, how big could this be, is next. Progress is this notion that good entrepreneurs get stuff done. You have to demonstrate that you've moved from A to B over some period of time, and it doesn't matter if A is, if B is getting to revenue or MVP or just putting up a website. But if you've been around for 5 years and you haven't accomplished anything, it's unlikely you're going to get anything done in the next 3 months. And so team, market progress, and then idea, of course, matters, but it's sort of deliberately last to make sure that we remind ourselves of that all the time. And so I think that's the biggest mistake, right, is focusing on that number 6 when there's 5 other things ahead of it.
So if I can dig deeper, right, everybody says team. What do you sense? What do you look for?
Yeah, so there's 3 teams in the criteria, and so each one of those teams might mean different things. So first of all, how well do you know your co-founder? Right? Did you meet at a networking event last Saturday because you heard that Techstars doesn't like to bring in companies that have solo co-founders, and so you went and found some random schmo at a networking event? Well, that's probably not awesome, but if you've known each other a long time, then you probably know each other really well. And a great question to ask in that we tend to ask in the interviews is, so tell me, if it's Joe and Mary, tell me, Joe, something that really bothers you about Mary. And what that is designed to bring out is, do they communicate well? Because if Joe says, it really drives me crazy how Mary's late for meetings all the time, right? And Mary laughs and says, yeah, Joe, you tell me that all the time. That's a very good sign. It means that they're communicating about bad things. If they look at each other and laugh awkwardly and make some pathetic joke about, well, I wouldn't want to say it in front of them, that's a really bad sign. And so that's an example of team. Complementary skill sets would be another example. And so you tend to have a technical co-founder and a business co-founder. If they are 2 dreamers and no technical chops in the co-founding team, that's a concern. So that's a couple of ideas so that it's not just about team. And it's not about I like them, that's somebody that I would like to be friends with. That's actually not important at all. It's those other criteria that I think matter more. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up on what you were saying on the teams. If anything, you have any kind of tests or psychometrics or anything on how to measure that? You know how if you go on an interview for a job, you need to pass a test or some kind of thing to see if you're going to gel with the team and that kind of thing. Do you have some kind of metrics like that?
We don't. It's not that it's a bad idea. We don't believe in it. I think that once you start automating how you select, and I know that taking a test and reading a score doesn't sound like automation, but it really is, because you get an F grade on that test or whatever it is, you're going to tend to reject them. And when you have automation like that, you tend to miss the outliers. You tend to miss the ones that really had something special about them that nobody else saw. And we want to rely on our investing instincts more than some very precise measurement statistics. It is a conversation, so we get we get 18,000 applications a year. We're not having 18,000 conversations. I think it's the 80-20 rule. I think we can rule out 80% of the companies without having a conversation and looking at the product video and looking at their website and looking at the materials that they sent us. And then we give them feedback, but by email. And then in each program, we would narrow it down to, say, a top 100 list. But then it absolutely is a face-to-face conversation, maybe over video, but and maybe only 15 minutes. But you can really get a sense of somebody in a live conversation that you can't in a video or an online application. Yeah, go for it. You're faster than he's up.
Within the program, how do you help those co-founders? With that aspect of how they're going to communicate, or everything in the program is always about selling, finance, all these hard metrics. But how about the human aspect of that?
Yeah, I mean, and so, that's hand-to-hand combat, right? It's not a group session where somebody sits up in the front and says, make sure that you communicate more. But I doubt that there's a program that we've ever had where we haven't had one company, one set of co-founders have co-founder issues, and it's a big effort, and it's sit down and you're sort of, I describe it that your mom and dad and chief cheerleader and kicking the pants all at the same time. You're doing everything that you can to cajole them, convince them, love them, support them, be hard on them, whatever they need. If they're not being real with each other, if they're not being real with you, call them out on it, and make sure that the co-founders are having the conversations that they need to. If it's a problem, let's get in front of it before it becomes a fatal problem. And I got you next.
You said earlier that while you're not in the business of predicting when downturns would happen, that you are predicting a downturn would happen.
Yeah.
And then it would be really significant. Why?
Why would it be significant, or why do I predict it will happen?
No, you said really significant. Maybe as many as 80% of the accelerators might fail. Is there a new paradigm around the corner that we don't understand?
No, I don't think so. So first of all, I'm not predicting that there's a major economic downturn coming. I really don't know. I'm not an economist. I just know the markets go up and the economy goes up and the economy goes down, and I think that's economics 101. Whether the fact that it's been a really long time without a downturn means that the next downturn will be more severe, sounds possible, but what do I really know? I used the number in the earlier session that an economic downturn could wipe out 80% of accelerators. That's not a statistical, I haven't done an analysis, but it is my sense that it is that severe. And I think the reason is some of the statistics that I have seen, to remember them now, I think it's 90% of accelerators have never had an exit, and 70% have never had a company funded. I don't know why those exist. I mean, if they're brand new or they have a different model, fine, right? But if you've been around a long time and you're not helping the startups that you're bringing into the program, they're never exiting, they're never getting funded, you've provided no help. And I hear stories of entrepreneurs that come and say, oh, God, this accelerator is amazing. I went to another accelerator, it was like cubicle farm, there was nobody there, mentorship was one guy via Skype a week, and he didn't really even give me any advice that was that good, right? And I gave up 6% of my company, right? Like, that accelerator does not deserve to be on this planet. And I think that whatever funding source that they have, when there's an economic downturn and people are losing their retirement money or whatever, their mutual funds are dropping, they're going to think twice about whether they should continue funding that accelerator, as an example.
So is it sketchiness of the accelerators?
For sure. Well, sketchiness is the wrong term because it implies malicious intent. And probably the one I gave you is an example. But I think that there are many accelerators out there that may think they're providing value, but that they're not providing value, right? The quality of the mentorship, the quality of the investor pool. They're just finding any 10 startups that are willing to come. And they're not putting the effort in, as I talked about at the beginning, to sort of figure out what do they need to be better? How do they do better at selection? What does the team mean? How do I evaluate team? Like, if you're not doing that and you're not getting better, you're just picking anybody. Yeah.
Two questions. First one is, there's a lot of conversation.
Give them to me one at a time because I can never remember the first one by the time people get through the second one.
First one is conversation around mental health. You talk about mental health and well-being a lot, especially in entrepreneurship. Do you guys do anything differently in your programming or in your alumni program or in your support network to help the entrepreneurs actually go through the journey?
Yeah, I mean, so it is a very important issue. Brad Feld is one of the co-founders of Techstars, and he's talked extensively, in his blog and in many conferences about his own struggles with depression and with mental health. We are hyper vigilant through the program so that if we feel that something is wrong, that we have an escalation process to make sure that we help that founder deal with the issues. We have a network of mental health coaches led by Jerry Colonna that are available to our founders to have somebody to talk to if they're feeling really, really low. Having said all of that, I believe we could do more. I believe that we could all do more because it's a really important issue. We certainly want to support entrepreneurs who really, really struggle with this issue because often you're sort of alone on an island dealing with problems and you don't have anybody to talk to. I got you, Danielle, but she had a second question.
For sure, and the second question was actually around mechanisms. Because you mentioned mechanisms twice. The first one was around weeding out like the bad mentors, so to speak. And then the second one was kind of like identifying founders who might be going through something. So can you share a little bit about the systems that you have in place?
Yeah, we're pretty distributed organizations. So if you go to Techstars in New York or Boston or Toronto or Adelaide or Paris, they might be different. But generally speaking, we always poll mentors and founders on their experience with each other. And so, for instance, if you have a mentor that is on their cell phone during the office hours, and believe me, it happens, and they're doing it consistently, that will show up in the survey because the founders say, well, that was a waste of a meeting. He or she was on their cell phone for too long. And it's not that one single occurrence means you're booted out of the system for being on a cell phone, but if it becomes a pattern that this person is a low-rated mentor, we will rotate out our mentors year by year to have the bottom group sort of politely tell them that we're full next year and find a new crew to come in and replace. Similar things for all of the different things that we do. It doesn't have to be sophisticated, but a quick, even informal survey would help a lot. Danielle.
I had a quick question about remote teams, remote mentoring, things like that. So for us, we started out with early stage companies, we were Techstars, we migrated towards larger companies that were more technical focused. What would best practices be as far as we don't want to force a company that's already raised a Series C to stay in the building and have a team physically located there for the 6-month program we offer? Does Techstars have a specific mandate as to you have to be in the space for this amount of time?
Yeah, so let me divide the question in 2 or maybe 3, because I think there's a difference between, so question 1 might be, what's the right stage of company to bring into an accelerator? And I would say that if you're at a Series C stage, I think it would be really hard for you to interact with a seed company. It has happened. We had a company at a $20 million revenue stage come through one of our accelerators, but it was a corporate accelerator and it was for a very specific business development opportunity. I think generally, we're looking at seed and Series A companies as getting the value from the accelerator. And if you're in that stage, you should be able to come for 3 months. Now, we have been experimenting and recently announced a remote accelerator. We call it Techstars Anywhere. And it's designed for founders that, for whatever reason, might not be able to travel to one of the cities where the accelerator is, or might have a personal situation where they're not able to work the normal hours or be present the normal hours of an accelerator. And that's a almost fully remote accelerator where mentorship, demo day is all done, the talk speakers is all done remotely with just 2 or 3 touch points where it's in person. And I think it's an interesting model that we've begun to experiment with that seems to be working really well. But ask me again in a year if I still think the same. So hopefully that answers your question. I think it's 2 different things.
Yeah. So essentially, well, even
older.
Yes, we're all getting older. But for example, now where you initially had somebody fresh out of college who might be starting a company, now you have people with family that really can't leave where they're from in order to participate. How do you, is that something you ever accommodate, or do you feel like that's something you can't?
Well, again, I think maybe if you have a young family and you need to be at home, Techstars Anywhere might provide you a remote opportunity without being able to be home for your kids, for instance. I don't think age is a factor, right? Maybe you could be too young, but you can't be too old. And we've had, a broad range of ages, participate in our accelerators anywhere from 18 to 72, I think, is the range. So.